Okay, so yesterday I asked you to work on problem number 4. So let's take a look at problem number 4. So problem number 4 says, a sales lot is filled with vehicles for sale. 1/3 of the vehicles are pickup trucks. 1/3 of the trucks are white. What fraction of the vehicles are white pickup trucks? So we've got 1/3 of 1/3, or we can write it 1/3 times 1/3. All right, so we could take the picture and we could split that into thirds, and that would represent 1/3 of the car lot when we draw the lines here. So we've got 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, which would be the whole car lot. This would be the white trucks. That would represent the white trucks. Or, I'm sorry, the pickup trucks. Now we have to represent the white pickup trucks. So we've got to do this in thirds. So we've got to divide this into thirds. And we have to do that with the whole thing to show the denominator. So this would be now 9 pieces. So this would be split into ninths. One part of this third are with white pickup trucks. So we've got 1/9. So this would be 1/9. And that makes sense because 1 times 1 is 1. 3 times 3 is 9. 1/3 of 1/3 is also 1/9. Okay? All right. So we could say that the car lot has 1/9 of the pickup trucks are also white. Okay? So that would be just as in sentence form. So now we have the problem set that we're going to go over together. And the problem set is very similar to what we did yesterday. So it says to solve, draw a rectangle fraction model to show your thinking. So that's the same thing that we were doing yesterday. I had the rectangles already drawn for you. Then write a multiplication sentence. The first one's been done for you. So it says half of 1/4 pan of brownies. So they had this pan of brownies and they split that in half. Then what they did was they split that into fourths. So we've got 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. That would equal the whole thing. One of those, when we color in one of those, because now there's 8 pieces, one of those would be 1/8 of the pan. So 1/2 times 1/4 equals 1/8. All right? So we could look at this and say that 1/8 of a pan of brownies are left. All right. So it says half of 1/3 pan of brownies. So we can draw the pan of brownies. This is going to make me hungry. All right, so we've got a pan of brownies, and again, I didn't use my straight edge, so it's not terribly straight. It says half of 1/3, so I need to show 1/3 of the pan. So there's the pan in thirds, 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. 1/3 of them would be right here. Now, I need to show half of that. So I'm going to draw my line. Even though some of these brownies are already gone, I'm still going to draw my line there so that I can see the fractional parts, what it would be when we're splitting them into smaller pieces. So when I split these in smaller pieces, now they're in sixths. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces. So they're in sixths. So if I want half of this third, that would be represented right here. So that would be 1/6. So half times 1/3 equals 1/6. So that would be 1/6 of the pan of brownies. All right, so the next one, 1/4 of 1/3 pan of brownies. Okay, so we've got our thirds again. Boy, I'm drawing terrific parallelograms. All right, so I've got thirds. All right, so I've split them in thirds. I've got to split them in, it says fourth of a third. So I need to split these in 4 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I've got, this would be my 1/3, and I only want a fourth of them. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I only want one of those. So I'm going to color this in. And I notice now with my smaller parts, I have 12 pieces. So 1/4 times 1/3 shows me 1/12 of the pan of brownies. 1/12. When I multiply this across, I've got 1 times 1 is 1, 4 times 3 is 12. So these, remember, are just our visual representations of what they're asking. Okay, so now we've got 1/4 of 1/4. Well, if I'm drawing my picture again, I'm having an awful time with these pens. All right, so fourths. All right, so that shows 1/4. Okay, so this shows fourths. 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. This shows 1/4 of the pan. Now, I only want 1/4 of that. Maybe I'm only allowed to have that much, that big a piece right now because we're getting ready to have supper. So your mom says, only take 1/4. All right, so we need to know how much we're allowed to take. So I split these into 4 pieces. Okay, I split those into fourths, 1/4 of a fourth. So I notice altogether, if all the brownies were there would be 16 brownies. Now these, remember, are already eaten. Those are all gone. So if I take 1/4 of what's left, so there's 16 pieces, and I take one of them, so this would be 1/16 of the pan of brownies. So I'm not taking too much before supper. So that would be 1/16. 1 times 1 is 1. 4 times 4 is 16. All right, so let's show here half of 1/6. So we've got to split these into sixths, 6 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Holy cow, those are small. In real life, I wouldn't make them that small. All right, so I've got half of 1/6. So this would be 1/6. I want half of 1/6. So when I split those, that gives me, now I have 12 pieces. If the pan was full, I would have 12 pieces there. So if I'm just allowed to have half of those 12ths, half, I should say half of this, the 1/6, I would have 1/12. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 6 is 12. So I would be allowed to have 1/12 of the brownies. All right, so we're going to go on and we're going to take a look at some story problems. And we're going to do the first 2 together. And then I want you to try the last 2 on your own. Okay? All right, so it says draw a rectangular fraction model for 3 times 1/4 and 1/3 times 1/4. Compare multiplying a number by 3 and by 1/3. Okay, we can do that. So a rectangular model for this, I'm going to start with, I have 3. Again, I'm having trouble with these pens. Probably drawing these a little bit big. 3 of 1/4. All right. So what we need to do here is we need to show 1/4 of 3. I know that when I take 1/4 of 3, I'm going to be taking 3 whole and splitting it into fourths. Each one of them will have to be split into fourths. All right. So I'm going to be taking 1/4 of each one. So I've got 3 whole and I want 1/4 of each one, which would give me 3/4. 3 times 1/4 equals 3/4. Now, here, I just start with 1 whole. So this goes with this problem. This one, I'm going to take, it says 1/3 of 1/4. So I have 4 pieces and I have to split them into, I've got 1/4 of that whole thing. So I've got 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. That equals the whole thing. I've got 1 of those fourths. I need to split this into thirds. And then I take 1 of those. So 1/3 times 1/4 equals 1/12. So it's very different. So here we're starting with a whole number. Here we only start with part of a whole. So that's the difference between the two. Okay? All right. So let's go down with number 3. Number 3, half of Isla's workplace is covered in paper. 1/3 of the paper is yellow sticky notes. What fraction of Isla's workspace is covered in yellow sticky notes? Draw a picture to support your answer. All right, so I'm thinking that 1/2 of her workspace is covered in paper times 1/3. So we're going to have to show her workspace. So there's Isla's workspace. All right, so 1/3, half of 1/3. So we're going to have to show this in thirds. All right, so 1/3 would be right here, 1/3 of her workspace. Okay, we're not showing this part of her workspace. This part of her workspace doesn't have paper in it. So I need half of this part of her workspace. So I'm going to need to split up her workspace and see that when I split it in half, I have each box represents 1/6 of her workspace. So half of this would be right here, and that would be 1/6 of her workspace. 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 3 is 6. So 1/6 of Isla's workspace has yellow sticky notes on it. Boy, she's a mess. Or maybe she's just really super creative and has a lot of ideas. All right, number 4. A marching band is rehearsing a rectangular formation. 1/5 of the marching members play percussion instruments. Half of the percussionists play the snare drum. What fraction of the band members play snare drum? All right, so 1/5 of the marching band. So we need to show 1/5 of the whole. So in order to do that, I need to split this whole thing into fifths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5, 5/5, which would equal the whole thing. So 1/5, okay, of the marching band are percussionists. So now I need half of that, because that's going to represent the people who play the snare drum. So I need to split this in half, the whole thing in half, even though I know these are not percussionists. I need to split that in half. And now I have 5, 10. So now these are split into tenths. So this original fifth part, I need to color in half of it. And that tells me how many of the, what fraction of the band plays the snare drum. All right? So what I would like you to do is I'd like you to finish up number 4. I'd like you to write the multiplication problem out to the side. And I would like you to do number 5 on your own and bring that back tomorrow. Like always, if you have any questions, you can always email me. Keep watching, keep thinking, and always stay curious. See you tomorrow.